Hello and welcome back to this final video in the Journey series. In this video I'm going to talk about where you could be in 30 days time after using our system and in 2 years time. Before I start talking about where you will be in 30 days and 2 years time, let me just talk a bit about the timings. The first one is about the 30 days. I say 30 days only because that's an extremely comfortable period of time in which you will be able to go through the process of performing an initial sexual abuse risk assessment and fully customizing a system for your needs for your organization. Unless you are an extremely large and very complex organization, that's an accurate statement. If you are very large and very complex, it will take longer, or could take longer. But that'll be more about you coordinating information from different parts of your organization than it will be about using our system. Our system, you can get through it. Technically, you can get through it in a couple of hours, but that doesn't involve engagement with the risk. And it's engaging with the risk that takes time. Most organizations will get through the process of assessing their risk and customizing it, usually within a week or two, because they'll deliberately spread it out over a series of days so that you get time to think about the different aspects of sexual abuse that you're trying to deal with. And as you walk through, and I'll explain the process that you're going to go through in a minute, but as you go through that process, that's what enables you to engage comfortably with the idea of trying to manage sexual abuse as a risk, understanding where the vulnerabilities are, understanding which controls are going to be appropriate for you, understanding which controls are also going to be palatable for everybody that works with you or that works for your organization, and understanding practically how you're going to implement those, and also making sure that you've got people in the right places and with the right information to be able to oversee the controls with the processes that ensure that the controls happen. So there's various responsibilities and issues that need to be addressed. But as I say, you can comfortably do that. Most organizations will comfortably do that in 7 to 14 days. It might take up to 30, but certainly in 30, you'll have a very clear idea of what you're trying to do and you'll be off and away. In 2 years, you will not only have obviously done the assessment and the customization, you'll have moved into the third phase of our process, which is to actually manage the risk. And what you'll have is a record of having conscientiously protected minors and vulnerable adults using risk management best practices. You'll be able to look anybody in the eye and tell them with complete conviction that you are doing everything you can and using the best practices to prevent sexual abuse. And coincidentally, to those stakeholders that you need to answer this question, you can also tell them that because you have a record of using the best practices and conscientiously using them, you're also protecting your organization from the reputation, disruption, legal and financial risks associated with sexual abuse. So, in other words, the prognosis is in the short term, you will have set up the system. After 2 years, you will have very ample evidence that you are using the system conscientiously. And that's what protects you in all the different ways that protection is necessary in view of the different types of consequences that sexual abuse can have on an organization and the people that work for the organization. So that's broadly speaking the 2-minute version of this. I'd like to now go into a little bit more detail about what each of those 2 stages is going to involve and what that 7 or 14 or 30 days is going to look like, depending on the size of your organization and its complexity, and then look at what that story is going to be telling in 2 or, more importantly, 5 and 10 years' time. Because then you've really got a good story to tell, because you'll also be then telling the story of how you've continuously improved your system by using the newly discovered risk management best practices that our platform will have helped to uncover. But I'll come to that at the end. So let's look at the first. Let's make it a 7-day process. For most organisations, it's more than possible to do it within 7 days. What you're going to be looking at first of all is a series of video trainings where you'll learn to and understand what risk management best practice is all about. how you think like a risk manager, what the mindset looks like, what the activities look like, what risk management best practice really means and the direction it's going to take you in, and why it's going to help you engage comfortably with the idea of sexual abuse. The reason for that is that risk management best practice defines risk as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. So the way you're going to be engaging with sexual abuse is not with sexual abuse directly. You will have to engage somewhat with it. That's unavoidable. But the way you're going to be thinking about sexual abuse is how it can impact your objectives and whether you achieve them or not. And that's a different perspective to be taking, because what you're looking at is how, first of all, how can managing sexual abuse risk well help me achieve my objectives, which is a perspective that most people don't even think about. And secondly, if things go wrong and if we're unable to prevent sexual abuse, how can I make sure that we still achieve our objectives or get as close to them as we possibly can? So that's why we think it's that the approach that we're taking enables you to engage comfortably with sexual abuse risk. So and that's the foundation learning that you'll go through the initial phase. Once you've completed the foundation learning, you will embark on a sexual abuse risk assessment. And there are, broadly speaking, 3 stages to that. The first stage is going to involve you understanding your organization, because you need to have a baseline for what your organization looks like today so that when it changes in the future, you'll be able to identify those changes quickly and to consider what impact, if any, they have on your sexual abuse risk. So first of all, understand your organization. Based on the understanding of your organization, you will then be able to identify where it is, when, how, to whom, and so on, minors and vulnerable adults are potentially at risk of sexual abuse. We'll walk you through this whole process, but that's the second stage you're going to go through. So you'll understand where potential vulnerabilities are. You're also going to start thinking about where your sexual abuse risks are, because your sexual abuse risks aren't just, if you think about the 4 risks that we've talked about, the reputation, the disruption, the legal, and the financial, the risks aren't just that sexual abuse happens. It's that you're not considered to be taking sexual abuse seriously. It's that you're not using best practices. Those are risks in and of themselves, and they're just examples of some of the risks that you may be exposed to. So you're going to be looking at where you are exposed to sexual abuse risk. And that's the risk assessment stage. We will provide you with yet more videos at each stage of that process so that you understand what it is you're looking at. And depending on the package that you buy from us, we can help facilitate that conversation internally for you, or you can do it yourself and just rely on the videos that we provide and the workbooks that we provide, the very extensive workbooks that are designed to help you engage others in your organization, to collaborate with you if you're the sexual abuse risk manager. The idea is that you will collaborate with your colleagues, and we provide workbooks that enable you to engage and enable that collaboration. So that's the risk assessment stage, foundation learning and risk assessment. Once you've done the risk assessment, you're now in a position, what you end up with at the end of the risk assessment is essentially a prioritized list of vulnerabilities and a prioritized list of your risks. And now what you do is consider the controls, first of all, that you're going to implement to make sure that you're addressing all of the vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities you're going to look at in, broadly speaking, 3 areas. What are you going to do to make sure that people don't have access to minors and vulnerable adults unless you let them? What are you going to do to make sure that the environment where the interactions are going to take place is as secure as possible? And that's not just from a physical perspective, it's from a behavior requirements and expectation perspective as well. And so thirdly, you're going to establish behavior requirements and expectations for everybody that you're allowing into that environment. And you're going to work through a series of control options that will enable you to configure intake, environment and behavior requirements and expectations all together, such that at the end of the first half of the customization process, you will have addressed each of the vulnerabilities with appropriate controls that deal with your vulnerabilities, and that you've chosen controls, and you've not just chosen controls, you've chosen how you're going to apply them in a way that makes sense for you. And that list of controls will include, because this is where the safe environment does appear, that will include criminal background checks, it will include training, and it will include policies and procedures around one-to-one interactions, but it will include more as well. The next part of the customization, the major part of the customization, there are bits I've missed out for the sake of keeping this simple for now, but they don't involve choosing leadership and deciding on what your principles are. But I can talk about those at more length later. Or if we have a Zoom conversation, they're not difficult. I just want to keep this simple. So the next thing you're going to do is look at your risks, and you're going to look at the processes that are going to ensure that your controls are, because the major risks you have are that you don't implement the controls that you've chosen to implement. So you're going to make sure that you design processes that ensure the controls happen, that they happen as intended, that the intended result is actually, as you see it, what you need, that you do or do not need to adapt the controls, and that you make sure that when change occurs, you consider change, and you constantly improve your processes and your controls. So you're dealing with controls to deal with vulnerabilities and processes to deal with risks. And that will bring you to the end of your customization stage. What you'll then do, and that's broadly speaking, that's the end of the 7-day period, because what you've now got is a record in our system of having identified or understood how your organization operates. You've understood where minors and vulnerable adults are potentially at risk from sexual abuse, and you've identified controls that are going to address all those vulnerabilities, and you've identified processes that are going to make sure those controls and your risks are effectively managed, and that you keep everything in sync. What you then do for the next 2 years is manage those controls and manage those processes. And so what you have at the end of 7 days is the setup. That's done. And what you then do is you go into the management phase, where you are basically doing 3 main things. The central coordinating function of this system is regular sexual risk group meetings, where the sexual abuse risk manager will be joined by a sexual abuse risk group. And you don't have to have a separate group for this if you've already got other risk groups in your organization, or other meetings that this can be added to. That's absolutely fine. All you need to do is to make sure that you are regularly discussing 2 sets of agenda items. On the one hand, there are regular agenda items that you're going to look at, which deal with making sure that the constant controls are always taking place. That's going to be about a half-hour process in a meeting. It'll take you an hour maybe to prepare for that meeting, and it won't be necessarily one person doing it. It might be 2 or 3 people, depending on how you've allocated the responsibilities. But the reporting into those meetings shouldn't take more than maybe half an hour for the regular items. There are then items that you don't need to look at so often, which are to review the processes. And for example, you may not need to review the physical environment you operate in more often than once a year, or even every 2 years. And so that will appear as an agenda item in your regular, say, monthly or quarterly meetings. That won't appear more often than maybe every year or 2. And you'll have 2 or 3 of those at each of your meetings, because there's, let's say there's 10 regular items, and there's another 10 less frequent items that you'll deal with. And you'll choose 1 or 2 of the less often items to add to the regular items, so that maybe your meetings, the actual meetings themselves, might only last 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the complexity of the issues you need to deal with, and in particular, if you have incident responses to discuss. Or you have major changes to discuss, because those are the 2 other aspects that you're going to be dealing with. The first is incident response. You will have created, as part of your processes, the customization stage, you will have created an incident response plan, and you will also have created a mechanism to look out for and to enable you to discuss change. either change that you plan or change that you observe. Either way, you'll be ready to deal with it using the tools that we have embedded into the system. And so those are the three major things that you're going to be doing. Managing the regular meetings to make sure the system is staying in sync and is performing as you've designed it to perform. Responding to incidents and feeding that information back into the system to make sure that you keep learning, and adapting or recognizing change and or observing change, or planning for change and building that back into the system as well. There is the constant improvement aspect that also comes into it, but that's part of the, remember I said that there were two sets of agenda items, that's part of the less often set of agenda items, where you will look to identify where best practices have moved on to on maybe an annual basis, maybe half yearly, that's up to you, but you'll be able to choose how often you look at that. And let's now just talk about some of the support services that we provide to enable this to happen. We're going to, in addition to the four core modules that I've just talked about, the foundation learning, the assessment, the customization, and the management, if you choose, we can help you by providing a facilitation service to walk you through the whole of the assessment and the customization stage, if you would like us to, or you can just rely on the videos and the workbooks that we provide and use the email, phone, or Zoom help that we'll provide throughout that process. And you can call us or email us at any time and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. We'll also provide you with access to the SAM Risk BOK. I talked about how we operate on a platform. We operate on a platform so that everybody's using the same system. Everybody's managing the system however they want, and nobody will ever see how you are managing your system. We never share your information with anybody else. But what we do is, because you're looking at a risk assessment and a customization, and then at managing your risk, what we see at an aggregated level is the nature of risk that's being dealt with, how it's being managed, and then the performance of that managed. So we see risk management performance where you see assess, customize, and manage. So what we can now do is assess the performance of risk management practices in different contexts. And that enables us to learn and to coordinate the hunt for the future practices that will be significantly better at preventing sexual abuse than the current practices, though. So you'll always be able to use the best practices and we'll always be identifying better ones. That's broadly how this model works. The SAM Risk BOK is where we put all that we learn from our analysis, so that you've always got access to it. You can look at it at any time, and we provide, not only do we provide monthly live Q&A sessions so that you can always just join the Q&A session, ask a question, or listen to other people asking questions and get some information that way. But every quarter we'll provide ongoing learning where we will put together a presentation of all the things that we've learned in the last quarter, so that we'll be constantly providing you with updates on what sexual abuse risk management best practice is doing. As I said, we also provide you with workbooks for the assessment and customization phase. These are about 50 pages long. What they do is that they not only are downloads of what you're going to go through in the system, but they also provide some of they're designed to help you facilitate a collaborative process amongst your colleagues inside an organization to enable you to work together to go through the assessment and customization phases. So there's some various projects that you'll undertake together. Like, for example, silly things like you'll write newspaper headlines of where you want to be in a couple of years' time, and that will help you draw out what your objectives are. You'll also talk about what you'll get the opposite headlines, and you'll have to try and figure out what went wrong and what could have gone wrong. And so you start working on understanding what your risks could be. There are other issues, and if you have a look at our service description on the website, you'll see the full extent of the services that we provide. But broadly speaking, what we have found with the hundreds of organizations that we've taken through this process so far is that with the combination of the initial foundation learning that we provide, the videos that are embedded throughout the process, and the ability to call us at any time, and we'll sit down, we'll convert more or less every call that we get, we convert it into a Zoom, we go through the issues, we talk them through, and we've not yet found a situation where we weren't able to get somebody past an issue or a concern very quickly, and they moved on and have gone on to successfully assess and customize their systems and are up and running and now managing their systems. That's broadly speaking the 7-day process, and our objective is to get you through that as smoothly as possible. And what we say is that if at the end of 30 days you're not happy with where you are, we'll give you a full refund. So we're not going to say, you're not stuck with this if you don't like it. If it doesn't work for you, fine, no problem. No questions asked, we'll give you a full refund. We do ask, though, that you do try the system. We don't want you to buy the system, not use it, and then expect a refund. If you engage with it, you try to use it, and it just doesn't work for you for whatever reason, then that's okay. We'll provide you with a 100% refund. Where you're going to be in 2 years' time and 5 years' time is that you're going to have you'll have created your system in the 7 days. You'll have customized you've done your assessment. You'll have customized your system. What you'll now also have is a record every month, maybe, or every quarter of having reviewed your assessment and your customization and make sure that everything is still in sync. That's a high-level review. You're not doing a full reassessment every time, far from it. And you're making sure that the controls that you've decided to implement are being performed as you wanted them, as you decided they should be performed, I should say. And you're also making sure that where you can improve them, you change them. And you're recording all of this all the time. And you're recording it in our system so that we have a constantly updating record of what you're doing to manage sexual abuse risk and to keep children safe from sexual abuse. And we track all the changes that you make to your system over time. And this is one of the key features of our system. I mentioned this in one of the earlier videos, but risk is dynamic. Risk management must be dynamic. Your system, your organization, your risk, none of those things are going to stay static for very long. You should expect to be using the system on a regular basis and adjusting and adapting and tinkering and changing and recording notes and comments and thoughts. All of the tools are there for you to do that. And the point is that what you create over time is there can be no argument. If you record all those things, there is no longer any argument about whether you have been conscientiously protecting minors and vulnerable adults in your care, because the evidence is patently, clearly there in front of everybody for the world to see. And if one of the challenges that happens when a sexual abuse claim is made is that if you ask an attorney what would they ideally like to be able to go into court with, or rather to go into a settlement negotiation with, what they want is abundant proof that you've done everything you reasonably can to keep children safe, because that's how you protect yourself as well as possible from the reputation, legal disruption and financial consequences of not being able to prevent sexual abuse. That's what BOKRIM delivers. But it delivers a bit more than that, because what we also deliver is the ability for you to constantly improve your practices, because we're constantly improving the best practices because we're built on a platform. So you'll always be using the best practices and they will always be moving ahead. That's how we're going to be able to prevent sexual abuse from rising, or stop sexual abuse from rising, and in the future start reducing sexual abuse. For reasons I won't go into in too much detail today, we're not sure that sexual abuse can ever be fully prevented. There are always going to be adults that find children sexually attractive. Children never understand what sexual abuse is, or too many don't understand what sexual abuse is. And candidly, any adult is capable of making a stupid decision, or, as the technical jargon has it, to be a situational abuser as opposed to a preferential abuser. So we don't think that it's possible to imagine a future where sexual abuse has been completely eliminated, but we certainly want to make sure that as far as is absolutely possible, it's been eliminated in all the organisations that are using risk management best practices to protect minors and vulnerable adults. I hope that's given you some idea of what BOKRIM is going to deliver to you if you choose to work with us to implement risk management best practices to manage your sexual abuse risk. If you've got any questions about anything I've said or the way you're managing your sexual abuse risk now, or you'd like a demonstration of our system, please book a Zoom with me, and I'd love to meet you in a Zoom call sometime soon. Thank you very much.